The air was thick with tension as William Hayes, the operations manager at Quantum Innovations, loomed over Sarah Williams, the newest night cleaner. His voice, low and venomous, dripped with contempt. "Don't you ever talk back to me, Sarah. You're nothing here. Nothing." His cold, narrowed eyes flicked to the reports in his hand, his annoyance palpable. Sarah swallowed hard, willing herself to remain composed. "Sir, I've already cleaned the floors. They're spotless," she replied, her voice steady but soft. But William wasn't listening. Without warning, he snatched a full cup of water and with deliberate cruelty upturned it over her head. The icy liquid soaked her hair, streamed down her face, and pooled at her feet on the freshly mopped floor. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as the cold shocked her system, but it was the humiliation that cut deepest. William sneered, his voice devoid of even the slightest shred of empathy. "Now you've got something real to clean," he taunted before tossing the empty cup aside and striding away, his arrogance leaving an acrid taste in the air. But what William didn't realize, what he couldn't even fathom, was that in his cruelty, he had just begun unraveling everything he held dear. Sarah Williams, a woman of 28, had worked tirelessly to earn her place at the top. A graduate of Harvard Business School, she had risen swiftly through the ranks at Quantum Innovations, the very company her father, Robert Williams, had built from the ground up. Under his leadership, the company had grown from a fledgling startup to a billion-dollar empire. His vision had been uncompromising, his dedication unparalleled. But 6 months ago, everything changed. A heart attack forced Robert to reassess his priorities. His relentless work ethic was no longer sustainable, and for the first time, succession planning became urgent. Sarah was the natural choice to take the helm, but Robert, a perfectionist to his core, hesitated. One evening over dinner, he voiced his concern. "Sarah, you are brilliant in business. Your skills are undeniable, but there is something you don't understand." Sarah leaned in, curious. "And what is that?" "You don't know what it's like at the bottom. You've never seen this company through the eyes of the people who keep it running, the ones without titles or corner offices." She frowned. "So what do you suggest?" "I want you to go undercover," Robert said, his voice firm. "Work as a cleaner. See what this company truly is beneath the polished facade." It was a bold idea. Some might even call it reckless. But Sarah had never backed down from a challenge. And so she became Janet, a nameless, faceless member of the cleaning staff. Her transformation was stark. Gone were the sharp designer suits, the delicate jewelry, the perfectly styled hair. In their place, she donned worn-out clothes, a plain headscarf, and the stiff, uncomfortable uniform of a janitor. No makeup, no presence, just another body in the shadows. Her first shift began at 10 p.m., when the executives had long since left the building. The night supervisor, Mike, barely spared her a glance as he handed her a set of keys and a checklist of duties. No one met her eyes. No one acknowledged her presence. As Janet, Sarah was invisible. She moved through the gleaming halls of Quantum Innovations, a ghost in her father's empire. Executives brushed past her without a second glance, some even knocking against her cart without so much as an apology. In offices where employees lingered, she was no more than the background noise to their conversations. She didn't exist. The physical toll of the work was brutal. Her back ached, her hands stung from harsh chemicals. But what unsettled her more was the dehumanization. She was nothing in the very company her father had built. Night after night she returned, determined to understand the company from the ground up. With each shift, her eyes opened wider. The maintenance staff, the lifeblood of Quantum Innovations, were treated as disposable. Their labor was invisible, their voices unheard. She observed the patterns, the disregard, the quiet exploitation. And at the center of it all was William Hayes. His cruelty was relentless. He nitpicked her work, fabricated mistakes, made her redo spotless tasks over and over until her fingers bled. And he wasn't alone. Derek Phillips, the head of marketing, was just as insidious, taking pleasure in belittling her. He made her scrub floors that were already clean, reveling in his ability to exert power over someone he believed was beneath him. But William, he took the abuse further. During a restroom inspection, he scrutinized every inch, finding fault where there was none. He smirked as he pointed out an imaginary flaw. No wonder we can't keep good cleaners around. Maybe we should just outsource the whole operation. Sarah clenched her jaw, swallowing her anger. She had expected some level of mistreatment, but this? This was systemic. What struck her most wasn't just the cruelty, it was the silence. No one intervened, no one dared. Fear had embedded itself into the company's culture so deeply that speaking out was unthinkable. The company her father had built, once a beacon of integrity, had become a machine of exploitation. The breaking point came on her fourth night. She had just finished polishing the executive lounge when William arrived, as always, looking for something to criticize. His gaze locked onto a nearly invisible smudge on the coffee table. "You can't even handle the simplest tasks," he sneered. "This company deserves better than you." Sarah's pulse pounded, but she remained silent. She had a plan. Every word, every injustice, every humiliation, she had documented it all. And when the time was right, she would expose it. The final straw came the next night. She had just finished mopping a hallway when William approached. She moved her cart aside, ensuring there was ample space for him to pass. But he didn't just walk by. He swung his arm out, deliberately knocking over the cart. Cleaning supplies clattered to the floor, detergent splashing in all directions. William barely glanced at the mess he had created. Instead, he smirked. "Now you've got something real to clean up." He stepped through the spilled solution, leaving a trail of footprints, and walked away without a second thought. Sarah stood there drenched in frustration and indignation. But beneath the anger, something deeper ignited, a burning, unwavering resolve. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about justice. And soon, very soon, William Hayes would learn that the woman he had humiliated wasn't just another nameless cleaner. She was Sarah Williams, and she would not be silenced. This was not just about a spilled drink or a dirty floor. It was about power wielded like a weapon, about cruelty so ingrained in the company's culture that it had been allowed to fester unchecked. As Sarah knelt to wipe up the mess, she swallowed the lump forming in her throat, forcing back the tears that burned at the corners of her eyes. This was not just about humiliation. This was about something far bigger, a deep, systemic rot that had poisoned every corner of quantum innovations. And she was done being a silent witness. The next morning, she set her plan into motion. Sarah had always been meticulous, a master of preparation, but this was different. This wasn't just about gathering facts. It was about documenting the truth, ensuring that every act of cruelty, every moment of abuse, every violation of human decency was captured and recorded. She took photos. She made notes. She recorded conversations in secret, each piece of evidence adding to the growing weight of injustice she carried. What had begun as an undercover operation to observe had transformed into something far more personal. This was no longer just a mission. This was a war. It wasn't just about William and Derek, about exposing the men who had turned cruelty into sport. It was about dismantling the entire system that had allowed them to thrive unchecked. It was about confronting the culture of fear that had taken root, about giving voice to those who had spent years swallowing their pain in silence. The night she found herself scrubbing the floors outside the executive offices, she felt a shift within her, a resolve that hardened into something unbreakable. She wasn't just a janitor anymore. She wasn't just Janet. She was the reckoning this company never saw coming. Days turned into nights, each shift reinforcing her determination. The more she uncovered, the more enraged she became. The corruption ran deep. It wasn't just mistreatment of employees, it was a calculated exploitation of power, a game played at the expense of those deemed too insignificant to fight back. And then came the moment that shattered whatever restraint Sarah had left. Derek Phillips, the ever-smug head of marketing, had been working late. She had barely stepped into his office when he sneered at her. "Good, you're here. This place is a disaster. Coffee stains, smudges. I need everything spotless." She had spent days cleaning this office. She knew it was immaculate, but she nodded and set to work, knowing that resistance would only escalate the cruelty. And yet Derek wasn't content with watching her scrub. He wanted more. He wanted control. He pointed out imaginary imperfections, making her repeat the same tasks over and over again, his gaze glinting with satisfaction each time she obeyed. When he finally dismissed her with a smug, "There you go, that's more like it," she knew she had reached her limit. This wasn't about cleanliness. This was about breaking her spirit, about reminding her of her supposed place. She walked out of that office that night knowing that she would never again let anyone make her feel that small. But it was Veronica Wells, the ruthless vice president of sales, who delivered the final, unforgivable blow. Sarah had been mopping the floors outside the conference room when Veronica approached, her sharp heels clicking against the polished floor. "What do you think you're doing here?" Veronica's voice was sharp, irritated, her presence radiating authority meant to intimidate. Sarah straightened. "I'm scheduled to clean this room, ma'am. I'll be finished shortly." But Veronica wasn't interested in listening. "Do you know who I am?" she snapped. "You're interrupting my meeting. Do you not understand basic professional courtesy?" The words stung, but Sarah remained steady. "I'm just following the schedule," she said evenly. "I'll be done soon." That was when Veronica stepped closer, her eyes blazing with fury. And before Sarah could react, the slap landed, sharp and humiliating, its echo ringing through the empty room. For a moment, everything stopped. The sting burned her cheek, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was the sheer, overwhelming reality of what had just happened. Veronica glared at her, venom dripping from her words. "You better clean this room properly, or don't bother coming back tomorrow. You are nothing here." Sarah stood motionless, heart pounding, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She felt the silent stares of employees who had seen everything but done nothing. Their silence was deafening, and in that silence, Sarah made a decision. She was going to end this. That night she combed through the evidence, piecing everything together, ensuring every detail was ready for what came next. It wasn't enough to simply confront the executives. She had to make sure the world saw them for who they really were. This had to be public. It had to be undeniable. The next morning, she walked into Quantum Innovations for the last time as Janet. She moved through the halls with purpose, her heart pounding as she prepared for what was to come. She had been scheduled to clean the executive boardroom before an emergency meeting, and she made sure she was there when the executives filed in, unaware of the storm about to crash down upon them. At exactly 10 a.m., her father, Robert Williams, the company's chairman, called the meeting to order. "I've called this emergency session to address a serious issue," he began, his voice grave. "For too long, we have allowed a toxic culture to fester within these walls. That ends today." As he spoke, Sarah stepped forward. She removed her cleaning headscarf, let her hair fall freely, and replaced her cheap glasses with the designer frames she had worn before her disguise. Gasps echoed around the room as the realization hit. William, Derek, Veronica, their faces drained of color as they recognized her. The janitor they had tormented was standing before them, transformed. "I'm Sarah Williams," she said, her voice steady, "and I am the new CEO of this company." She clicked the remote, and the first image appeared on the screen. William smirking as he poured water onto her mop. Then Derek making her scrub invisible stains. And finally, the video of Veronica slapping her, the sound ringing out in the stunned silence of the boardroom. "I have been documenting everything," Sarah said, her voice unshaken. "Every act of cruelty, every abuse of power, and I have ensured that it is all on record." There was no escape. The weight of their actions crashed down upon them as one by one, they realized their reign of impunity was over. William stammered, "You can't do this. I've given this company 20 years of my life." But his pleas meant nothing. Derek and Veronica tried to defend themselves, but there were no excuses that could erase the truth staring back at them. Robert Williams stood beside his daughter, his expression unreadable, but his voice resolute. "This ends now." By the end of the meeting, the executives who had ruled through fear were stripped of their titles, their power, and their illusions of invincibility. 6 months later, Quantum Innovations was unrecognizable. The culture had been rebuilt, not on fear, but on respect. Employees no longer walked on eggshells. Sarah Williams, now CEO, stood at the top not because she had inherited the role, but because she had earned it. Because she had seen the worst of this company and had made it her mission to change it. As she gazed out of her office window, she knew this was only the beginning. The past had been reckoned with, and the future, it was hers to shape.